Thanks for tuning in to Hearthstone Media, where we use our superpower of hindsight to look at TV series and movies and see how they could have been improved. Warcraft is one of the biggest games of all time, with probably the most expansive character-led stories of any video game, covering 3 PC games, books, and World of Warcraft with 8 expansions and counting. This makes it the perfect franchise to create a new movie universe to rival that of Marvel and Star Wars. Blizzard know this and tried to build their own movie universe with Warcraft: The Beginning. This movie, however, didn't quite achieve what they were looking for, failing to connect with new audiences and the general population. Now there are rumours that Blizzard are looking to reboot Warcraft, potentially with actors like Chris Pratt and directors like Peter Jackson. Today, we'll be looking at what needs to be considered when rebooting Warcraft. We won't be focusing on reviewing and critiquing Warcraft: The Beginning, as many have done before. But we will, however, mention some aspects that didn't work in order to understand how we can successfully reboot Warcraft and create a movie universe that will last for years to come. Then we'll present a short teaser trailer of our proposal for the first movie in a rebooted Warcraft cinematic universe. When we look at stories, we like to think there are 3 main areas that need to be considered when planning any story. These 3 key aspects are the stage, the story, and the characters. As we are starting a new movie franchise, pulling from an existing world of stories, especially as it's a fantasy franchise, we'll need to start with the stage to create a framework for the overall story and help reveal the world of Azeroth. The stage, or world, in a fantasy franchise is vitally important as it sets the rules of that world and the framework in which all these stories exist. With Warcraft, our world is already well established through games and books. So when we reboot Warcraft, we just need to decide when and where this story will begin. In Warcraft: The Beginning, the stage or location of the story is quite varied and moves from place to place very quickly. From memory, in the first 5 to 10 minutes, we visit Draenor, but then never really see it again. Then in the next 10 minutes, we visit Ironforge, Stormwind, Goldshire, Medivh's Tower, and the Elwynn Forest. The desire to show all the places from the First War has meant we don't really get to know any of them, or Azeroth as a whole. When introducing a new fantasy world to an audience, it's important to help connect them with the world and with the people of that world. A good example of this is Lord of the Rings, which connects audiences to the world and characters by setting the first act of the story with Frodo and the hobbits in Underhill. Looking through the many years of stories within Azeroth and beyond, there are 2 real main points where a Warcraft reboot could successfully introduce new fans to this world and keep them engaged. Those are the beginning of the First War or before the Third War. These 2 points are the best time to introduce new fans to Azeroth, as they are a time of stability when we can experience life before the chaos. And from these points, there will be set in motion events that will create many great stories, characters, and adventures. If we decide to begin before the First War, we are starting at the beginning of everything, the ground floor. This would focus on the Kingdom of Stormwind, or the towns and cities that surround it. This allows our audience to slowly unravel and discover the mysteries of Azeroth, from trolls and orcs to elves and magic. This also means there will be no need for prequels, which we know don't always turn out as intended. This aligns with how franchises such as the MCU started. They began with Tony Stark building a mechanical suit. This was a very grounded reality and easy for new fans to accept. Marvel then grew their world to eventually introduce many far-flung characters and ideas such as talking raccoons, sentient trees, alternate realities, time travel, magic, and more. And all of this has been accepted and embraced by the audience because they were brought along for the journey. The other place we can begin is before the Third War. This would focus on Lordaeron or the areas around it. Starting at this point would involve establishing more of the world, introducing history, characters, races, and the consequences of the first 2 wars. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just needs to be done subtly and organically, so the audience feels like they're part of a larger world and aren't just feeling like they're sitting through lots of exposition. A great example of this is Star Wars: A New Hope. During this movie, we're thrust into the middle of a civil war. Through action, scenery and characters, we understand the control the Empire has, the history of the Jedi, the Clone Wars and much more, all whilst not slowing down the story, action or enjoyment. Something similar to this is what would be required if rebooting Warcraft before the Third War, to engross the viewer in the world but not inundate them with facts and exposition. Next, we look at the story and the important aspects that need to be considered for this reboot. When designing this story, we need to firstly consider what the story is about, what the goal of the story is, and keep it focused on that. In Warcraft: The Beginning, there were a number of storylines and themes occurring throughout the movie, involving multiple characters, which complicated the story for anyone not familiar with the original game. The overall story was that Gul'dan was seeking to reopen the Dark Portal to bring through the entire Horde and take over Azeroth. But also in the movie, there is Dorotan's betrayal of Blackhand, the origin of Thrall, Khadgar discovering the Fel, Medivh's betrayal, Lothar's son and death. There's Doomhammer's betrayal, Lothar and Garona's romance, Garona's freedom from the Horde and perceived betrayal, and probably more I've forgotten about. The reality is, there's probably 4 good stories in there. So as we look to reboot Warcraft, we need to simplify things and decide what the first movie is about and have a single goal for a single protagonist. The protagonist will undoubtedly face challenges and have obstacles to overcome in order to achieve that main goal. But as we're keeping that main goal simple, it will also allow the story to be more streamlined and spend more time with the characters, learn about their history, personality, and the importance of achieving their goal. Along with this, we can also include more in-depth organic world building as we spend more time in locations and learn about events from the past, other lands, and even hints to the possible future. This again can be seen with Star Wars: A New Hope, where the goal was to get the plans to Alderaan to help the rebels destroy the Death Star. This mission gets sidetracked and complicated when Alderaan becomes no more, but the story continues on and comes to a fitting conclusion because there is a clear goal in mind. Lastly, one of the most important aspects of any story is a protagonist. The quality of a protagonist can make or break a story, especially in a movie like Warcraft. In Warcraft: The Beginning, there was never a clear protagonist who the story was focused on. In this movie, we have Dorotan, who assumedly is our main protagonist, but then we also have Lothar, who is our other main protagonist. This was likely designed to mirror the games where we could play as both orcs and humans. This is a nice idea, but it ended up complicating the story. But this was only the beginning, as we also have Khadgar and Garona, who are both presented as secondary protagonists. Then we have Drakka, Doomhammer, King Lane and his wife, Lothar's son, the dwarf, Medivh, Gul'dan and Blackhand. That's a whole lot of characters. When rebooting Warcraft, we need to ensure that we have a single protagonist with a clear goal and a clear motivation for this goal. This goal and motivation need to be connected to their background and personality, helping create a more well-rounded, believable and relatable character. The MCU really highlighted how this can be done by introducing 4 different characters with their own stories and journeys, then combining them into a team with great success. This method of introducing characters individually, then bringing them together, would work perfectly for Warcraft, especially as we follow characters from either side of the conflict. Rebooting before the First War would likely start with Lothar as our protagonist, a human protagonist, one who the audience can relate to, but then in future movies we can start branching out, introducing orcs and other characters. A reboot starting before the Third War would likely focus on Arthas as our human protagonist, before then expanding to Thrall and other characters. So those are the main aspects we need to consider for rebooting the Warcraft cinematic universe. Our proposal for this would be to reboot from before the First War, to grow the story and world organically over time. We believe that having 4 main stories leading up to the First War would work perfectly, using the main characters of Anduin Lothar, Khadgar, Garona, and substituting Dorotan for Ogrim Doomhammer. The reason for this change is Dorotan's inclusion is more about Thrall, his son, than it is about Dorotan, and Doomhammer is destined to take the Horde from Blackhand, so it makes sense he would be one of our protagonists. Much like the MCU, each character will have their own story, but unlike the MCU, these stories will be more closely aligned, with events in each story impacting the next. This would culminate in a confrontation between humans and orcs at Stormwind, and the end of the First War. We've put together a little teaser trailer for the first story of the Warcraft cinematic universe, Last of the Arathi. We hope you enjoy, and let us know your thoughts and comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.